Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have a fantastic webinar lined up with a fantastic speaker. Today's topic is how to create a culture that supports technology, innovation, and creativity. My name is Cindy Corey. I'm a director here at Odysseyware. And just a couple housekeeping items before we begin. We are recording the event, so we will send a link to the recording as well as a link to the PowerPoint slides via email within 24 hours of the event. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and put those into the questions box that you see on your screen, and we'll answer those at the end. So now I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Michael Niehaus. Michael is currently a career technical education manager at the College of the Sequoias in California. He has been a secondary educator for 25 years as a teacher, advisor, director of activities, and learning director. He is the founding principal of the award-winning one-to-one project-based Minarets High School that opened in 2008. He is a Google certified innovator, Q lead learner, and a Buck Institute for Education national faculty member, and regularly presents on contemporary and progressive education issues. So with that, we'll turn it over to you, Michael, and get started.
Good morning, everybody. Fantastic to be here, and just to kind of have a little fun with it too. I'm just another old educator trying to stay relevant. So I like to have a little bit of fun. But I was inspired years ago by a number of people, and one of them was a guy who was a student advocate and keynote speaker on student issues. His name was Mike Smith, and he said something years ago that really made a big difference for me. And I love using this just as kind of a theme when we're talking about, you know, innovation and risks and learning is if it's not illegal or immoral, why not give it a try? In other words, what are we so afraid of all the time, especially in education, right? If we're not breaking the law or hurting anybody, it's probably an idea worth considering. So I just want that to always be a backdrop and a theme. And it has worked for me well working with students and embracing their ideas and their input and trying to take big challenges on. So we've been hearing about education reform forever. I've been a teacher since 1990, and I, as a young teacher at the time, was hearing about how things are going to change and was excited about that. I thought, okay, you know, that's good. I want it to be different than when I was in high school because I want my students to have new experiences. And, you know, the reality is things have changed, and yet a lot of things remain the same, especially in schools. And so reform might not even be the right word. Maybe we're in the precipice of education revolution in some ways. We definitely are outside of education. We're definitely things are happening that are influencing education at a level that we've probably never seen before, even though we have experienced change. And a lot of educators will say that we have seen this before. But I'm going to argue that we're kind of in a period of unprecedented change. Things are coinciding in our worlds and our society. One is that we are really a globalized world now. That is a new phenomenon, and we really are seeing rapid change with that. You know, the new economies that are emerging and how countries are changing. We really are in a technology revolution. Again, we've been saying this for a long time, but the rapidity of change that's happening now is just phenomenal. So I think if you look at smartphones being, 10 years old, think about that in the last 10 years, how that's impacted things. That's a rapid, accelerated change that we have never, ever experienced before. And it literally has changed everything, from commerce to communication to collaboration to almost everything. And so I don't want to overemphasize it, but we also have to not undersell it either, that this is really transformational what's happening. And our students are growing up in this, where we had a little bit of either advantage or disadvantage being able to see it, what it was like before and what it's like now. And it's going to only continue to accelerate. So that's why that idea of staying relevant is so important to me as an educator. The economy is changing. I mentioned this as we're globalized, but the reality is a lot of things we used to assume are just not true anymore. So, for example, when I was in high school and went to the university, I was told if you get a college degree, you'll get a pretty good job. And when I got a bachelor's degree, I was offered pretty good jobs in lots of different fields and industries. So were all my friends. That is not the case anymore. Not any degree guarantees you any job. Matter of fact, a lot of degrees don't get you any job, or they don't get you a job that you needed a degree for. And then if you add in all the debt that students incur and all the time wasted, so there's no guarantees. Things have changed a lot, and we're seeing a lot more of this independent contractor, gig economy. We're seeing that it is global, and it's changing quickly. The skills are different. A lot of things that applied when we were young still do, but a lot of them, there's some new things that are happening that are, again, kind of unprecedented. We do have new standards, obviously, maybe at a level that we've never seen before, coming at us from the technology standpoint, obviously from the instructional and curricular standpoint, things like the 4Cs and all these things are colliding as well, all relevant, but really demanding a whole new pedagogy and mindset when it comes to what learning it could be or should be about. And then I think finally too is all the choices people have now, which I think is a good thing. Some people may disagree, but the fact that we have charter schools, all the career pathways, all the independent schools, early college, dual enrollment, magnet schools, choice schools, and let's not forget online that people could go K-12, online school, grades kindergarten through 12th grade and now college, right, and beyond, and never actually enter a physical classroom. So I always ask people, what would happen if half the students at your school left tomorrow? What would that make your school like? Would we want to know why they're leaving and why they're choosing to go online? So again, a lot more choices, and that's going to impact all of our schools and all of our classrooms and all of our learning. So what's missing to me is the topic that is the most important, and I think the most underrepresented in all educational discussions, writing, pedagogy, professional development, textbooks, you name it, and that's culture. I'm really going to argue that culture is the thing that makes all those things possible, and yet we tend not to include that in any of the implementation that we're doing. So right now, for example, you'll see a lot of schools the last several years have been introducing technology like crazy. Most schools are either are 1-to-1, or they're 2-to-1, or they're transitioning to 2-to-1 or 1-to-1. They're doing, bring your own device, take home a school device, et cetera. But the reality is in that there's been some work to try to change instruction, but very little attention paid to what is the culture you're trying to create in a classroom or a school that supports having that technology about what's possible and a different role for students. And so we'll talk about that. So like as people who went through teacher credentialing programs, so if you're an elementary, junior high, high school teacher, you went through some sort of a teacher credential program, right? And if you're an administrator now, same thing, right? The reality is, do you remember courses or classes that dealt with culture? Maybe adolescent psychology or early childhood learning, but we really didn't talk about, and we talked about classroom management, but not classroom culture. That's a different thing, right? How do you create a culture that makes learning dynamic and interesting and students motivated and inspired and connected? So again, I don't think we spent enough time on it, and I wished we did have classes about how to develop culture. And I think you're going to see more professional development started to be directed towards this or be included as part of any instructional pedagogy that we're talking about. So my argument is culture is your brand. The reality, if you talk to students or parents, or for that matter, staff that are dissatisfied with their school or a teacher or a classroom or a district for that matter, the things that they're frustrated about are really things that are part of culture. So they complain about maybe the access or lack of access. They complain about maybe the communication or lack thereof, or they complain about the relationships or lack thereof, or the priorities. And really, if you start kind of trying to house these things, that's really about culture. It's really the things that they're concerned about is what does it feel like when they're at on the campus? What does their student feel like in a classroom? That really is all culture. So people make decisions based on this, and yet we don't necessarily talk about it as much, or certainly teach it and try to have everybody understand that this is what drives everything. So Peter Drucker, famous business leader, always said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think in education, we're seeing this a lot, is that we have lots of strategy, right? We have all kinds of the standards and our assessments and our protocols and our board directives and our state initiatives, and you can go on and on and on and on. And yet really the thing that's going to make or break any of those is the culture that we have. And if we're not creating a culture, we're probably inheriting or just assuming one that may be counterproductive. So who are we? So we talk a lot, outside of education, we have all these titles, but we have them in education too, right? We have teacher and principal, but we even have now districts have chief academic officers and, chief operating officers, CFO, chief financial, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, do we have a chief culture officer? And there are a few districts that do and schools that do, But I'm going to argue that if you're a teacher, a classroom teacher, you are the chief cultural officer of your classroom. You are the culture leader, the cultural model, right? And it's going to make all these things possible. If you are a site leader administrator, then you're the same thing for that district, right? I mean, that school site. If you're a superintendent, it's for the district, right? So challenging all of us as educators to look at ourselves that way is that we are cultural leaders, and that we establish a culture, and that the culture we establish is going to make things possible or potentially make things less likely in terms of the things that we want to do instructionally and relating to learning. Okay, so the idea is that let's look at that CCO thing, because in business, they really are starting to emphasize this a lot more, and they have for quite some time. So what do we tend to prioritize more than culture? Well, the reality is everything, right? And I think about, we spend a lot of time on curriculum, and rightly so, and a lot of time on instruction, and rightly so. And I think, if you look at administrators or district folks, boy, it's on finance and budget, and on compliance issues, and on technology, and our communication, and our planning, and our site plans, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet again, very little are we either establishing culture, communicating what that culture is, maybe improving the culture. And again, not to say that people don't. There is work done in this area, but I would argue that it is way down the list, and not represented as much as it should be. That probably would influence all these things that we spend our time doing. So when I think about student behavior, for example, and student discipline, if I think about the challenges we face in instruction and curriculum, and professional development and technology, all those things would be vastly improved if our culture was leading it and driving it. And that's sort of the main thesis there, right? Hey, we just started school, all of us, in the last several weeks. Some of us started maybe even 6 weeks ago, but a lot of us started probably in the last month or so across the country. And we all did a lot of things. We had, our buyback or in-service days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days before the school year started. And then we kick off our school year the first day of school in our classrooms, or maybe in some other gatherings in the first week of school, and we have staff development going on. And so my question is, did we start with culture? Did you start with culture? And if anyone would like to chime in right now on the chat, tell us an example of how culture was prioritized or led, either at a back to school thing, or at your buyback in-service days, or the first week of school. If anyone would like to share that, that'd be fantastic. I can tell you that my experience is that most schools don't do a lot in this area. When the teachers come back, they go right to teacher meetings, maybe staff development, professional development, all good things, but how much of a time are they spending, one, getting to know each other, getting to know the organization, getting to know what they stand for. And when students start school, I would argue that's the same thing, right? We might throw them into, at the high school, middle school level, we might throw them into a gym or auditorium and tell them about the rules. In a classroom situation, we might give them something like, class expectations, class set of rules, maybe a syllabi. But none of those things really are about getting people to feel comfortable, getting people to feel confident, getting people to get excited about what they could do. Anyone want to share anything? If there's not anything, we'll kind of move on. But the reality is, I'm going to suggest that we do start, and not just start and end, but start and continue. But we really got to make statements at the beginning of the year about what school is about. And I can talk about a program that a colleague of mine and I started at our high school that we opened up in 2008. We kind of accidentally stumbled the first week of our brand new school. We were not able to be on the school campus because the school wasn't completed yet. Long story, but the reality is we had to relocate the first week of school, and that forced us to do some things differently. So we redesigned the whole first week of school, and what we realized is this is the way school should start. Whether it's on campus or not, every student got to meet every teacher. Every teacher got to meet every student. We introduced them to the technology. We introduced them to kind of the vision for the year. We introduced them to all the people they would be working with. We got them excited about learning, and we got them excited about knowing each other. And we kind of dealt with that effective filter, right? A lot of anxiety went away. They felt like they had friends. They felt like this was going to be a great, safe, interesting place for them. They have a lot of adults that care about them. And then we just sort of perpetuated that every year. Instead of starting off the school year with academics per se, we started off with, school-wide lessons, school-wide activities, and so on, to get people to, again, know each other, know the adults, know their peers, know the different things that they could do, get some practice with each other with some protocols and some technology. And by the end of the first week, we had people producing, everyone had produced, maybe a presentation or a podcast, but meanwhile, they had also had really gotten to know one another and went home excited about school. And so I just know that we have a lot of students that, one, they aren't excited when they start school, or if they are excited, that excitement is a brief honeymoon phase, right? Because when they come back after those first couple of days, they're not they're not energized, right? So we really got to spend time energizing and getting people excited, and then we have to maintain that, right? So anyway,
Michael, we have a couple responses to the question. Okay. So in one school, the director of the CT Center always stresses that they have an environment of mutual respect, meaning teachers will treat students like young adults in a simulated workplace, and students are expected to act as such. So that's a great example. And then another one here, the principal sets up a Christmas tree with apples and back-to-school decorations, and also they put character education on the walls.
Okay. And again, those are the type of things we're talking about, right? And I know that one of the things that I think sometimes happens is we interpret this as just fun and games, or this is just, team building and get to know each other, but really it's culture building, and those relationships that are established and the confidence that could be established are going to allow teachers and students to go further academically. So I'm going to argue that we have to do things to get people to feel comfortable who they're working with and to get excited about what they could do. And I know that one of the things that always bothers me is we tend to tell them all the things they can do, but not what they can or could do. And there's 1,000 ways to do this, and I know that for teachers this can be a struggle because they want to start with the academics because they feel like they have so much pressure to get a lot of content in. And my argument would be to them is that if they spend some time early on with the culture building, that'll actually allow them to go further with the content because there'll be such a different environment and relationship. So, anything else there, Cindy? Or?
No, those were a couple comments there.
Okay. So we won't have time to go look at all these different companies out there, but when you guys most of us are familiar with Google having probably a pretty public culture in terms of the employees there have a lot of freedom, I think, and a lot of choice, and they're treated well. They have a lot of perks, I guess. But I think one of the things to look at is that how do they indoctrinate people? Like, so I wonder if you're an employee at Google, what's that first week like? I doubt it's just like they throw you in a cubicle and say get to work, right? They want you to know the organization, and I think the companies that are leading in the world these days are really paying close attention to that, and the companies that are not are starting to really struggle, in some cases going away. So that top-down, this is how we do things, be quiet and go to work, which is something we've done a lot in school, is really starting to be disappear in the real world. And if you talk to people that study millennials and even the younger, what they're interested in when they go to work is for a place that cares about them and for a place that values kind of their ideas and their input, and they will go somewhere else, if they can. And so it's not necessarily about the salary or the benefits, although those are certainly important. People are making decisions based on the environment. And I think when it comes to schools, you're going to see more of that too. Why are people choosing charter schools or choice schools or magnet schools or this school over that school? They're choosing that based perceived on what the environment is like. Does it feel safer, friendlier, more personalized? And so something just to keep, I think we need to look outside to see how others are doing this and see if it's relevant to us, and I think it is. Just a quick little story that I think is kind of fun, that I think this idea of when, especially for people that are administrators, but as a classroom teacher, how you value the opinion of others. So this is a great story you can look up online. Richard Montanez was a custodian back in the early 70s for Frito-Lay. And the CEO at the time of Frito-Lay challenged a kind of a company-wide challenge to come up with new products. He realized that they were kind of stagnant and they needed some new products. So Richard went home and he had experimented with some different food from his culture and from, kind of street food type things. And he ended up creating something that was the early version of the Flamin' Hot Cheeto. And he went to the CEO and said, hey, I have this idea. The CEO said, come back in 2 weeks. I want a formal presentation. Well, Richard had never done a formal presentation, was not formally trained or educated. He went and bought his first tie, checked out a book from the library on marketing, and then put this presentation and the product together, came back, and pitched it to the CEO. CEO loved it, and obviously flaming hot Cheetos. If you talk to students these days, I don't care what grade they're in, they love those things. I don't understand why, but the reality is that Richard was a guy who took, he took that to heart, right? So bravo to the CEO who said, hey, maybe where's our best idea going to come from? We don't know. So as an educator, I think we need to value all of our staff, and most of us know that classified staff, secretaries, support personnel, maintenance and operations, they have great ideas, and we want them to feel like they're part of the educational process. So we need to consider all their ideas. And if you're a teacher, the fact that your students might have great ideas about everything, ask students how the school year should start off. Ask students how the classroom should be designed. Ask students about the things they're interested in. I mean, we continually need to go to the stakeholders, right? And you're seeing that more in the business world, or you're going to see it hopefully more in education too. So again, I encourage you to look at his story. It's really good. And by the way, Richard now is like the international marketing director for PepsiCo, doing all of Latin America and so on. So he's extremely successful and talks about how he started. So my story, you guys, just real quickly, we won't watch this video, but you guys can, all these links will be available to you. I did get to start a new school in 2008 that was challenged to be different, innovative, and creative. So we had a board that said, hey, let's start a different kind of school. We're a public high school, but we're going to be project-based, one-to-one laptop, which in 2008 was pretty, forward-leaning, if you will. And they really wanted to have a culture that was different. They wanted to have a school that felt different. When students showed up there or attended there, or parents or community members, they wanted it to be super personalized, friendly, very accessible. So we tried lots of things. So including like all the teachers gave their cell phone numbers out from day one, and they continued to do that, publish all their cell phone numbers. And after that time, Google Voice came out. So that's a great way to do it. But the reality is we wanted students to be able to text us, certainly they email us, call us, if after hours, if they had, whether it be an academic question or challenge or a personal question or challenge. And the reality is students didn't use that a lot, but when they used it, it was important, or they felt it was important. And psychologically, I think it said a lot. But the reality is we talked about the Smart Start, how we started school differently, and it was us being accessible and open to them and giving students a lot to say and how the school operated, what kind of choices they had in the classroom. We really tried to treat them like young adults, that young professional thing that was mentioned earlier too. And maximize that relationship to maybe have them do things project-wise and academically that they had never done before, and to take on greater role of their learning. So start to the promise, we really tried to design the school to be about students. We really wanted that, and we surveyed our students quarterly, so every teacher surveyed them, and we'll talk about that later. But we continually reminded them that we wanted to hear from them, and if we were doing something that they thought was contradictory to the school's mission or vision, we wanted them to let us know. If they felt they were being mistreated by anybody on campus, student or staff, let us know. So all kinds of things happened. Like if we had a substitute teacher that was not living up to this expectation, our students would let us know. They would text us, by the way. So they would text the principal and say, this sub is not being respectful, right? And you know what? Most of the time they were being accurate in that description. So anyway, so just the idea that this is the kind of commitment we want, to make culturally, and the values that people have that will allow all those innovation and creative technological things to develop into projects and public work, right? So let's talk about real quickly, this will be about kind of three main ideas we're going to focus on. We're going to talk about the expanded role of students in this 21st century environment. We're going to talk about the relationship, the teacher-student collaboration, and the kind of the feedback loop. And then we're going to talk also about kind of how to expand opportunities for students, through pedagogy and through instructional opportunities. So this expanded role of students in this personalized learning class, we really have to start putting students in different positions and really start treating them differently, communicating with them differently, and it's really about empowering them. And I think as a teacher, that's something that I always was a goal of mine. I came out of the media field, and so I really was into the voice, and I wanted students to be active learners and to be really, to care about what they were doing and to become very connected to what they were doing. So I've always enjoyed the idea of trying to, have students be in charge, and who owns the learning, right? And I think for all educators, this is where the transition starts happening, is are we running the show all the time? And it certainly as adults, we are the leader, and we are the employee, right, in our classrooms and our schools and so on. But in terms of the learning, in terms of the actual learning, are we the only one in control of that, or do we want our students to kind of step up and to take charge of that? And I think we do, but we have to learn that when we do that, we're going to be in a different role. So we're not always going to be doing all the talking or running the show. It's going to be a different environment that may seem more chaotic, that may even seem less structured, but the reality is not necessarily, right? And so we really got to start viewing ourselves as the facilitator coach. So whether you're a classroom teacher, an instructional coach, administrator, this idea that, you know, am I just telling people what to do? You know, am I just dictating? Is everything so protocol heavy and structured that they aren't allowed to have any say in how that goes? The reality is, if we do, we're keeping things down at that low level of critical thinking, right? That depth of knowledge, the Bloom's taxonomy part, right? We have to, if you want the depth of knowledge to go up and the Bloom's taxonomy up, if you want that SAMR to go up, the idea that, you know, we are really wanting people to really critically think, they have to take on responsibility, they have to take ownership. And so one of the things we talked about is, you know, the student role in all this. And as a teacher, I've heard this for years, and I understand it even from a parent standpoint and from an educator standpoint, is that we want kids to be responsible, right? This is what we're trying to have them walk out of school with. By the time they go through a elementary, middle school, high school experience, we're expecting them to be young adults. But the reality is, we can't just tell them that, and we can't just communicate that. We really have to have them live that. They have to have experiences that make them that way. It's not just something that's magically going to happen. So the reality is, if you want responsible people who are taking charge of their lives and that care about learning and care about their futures, they're going to have to practice. They're going to be in situations, right? So the reality is, if we can create that in a school environment, they will hopefully leave us in that you know, sort of mindset that we're hoping, right? And then they are ready to take on college and career, right? So we got to do that by putting them in different roles. So think about, you know, I know elementary teachers that have been doing this for years, where they always have students, you know, who take leadership roles in the class, and it could be almost anything, you know, and these can rotate, right? So I have some samples here, like project coordinator, the tech coordinator, the media coordinator, the social media coordinator. This is a great one because a lot of our teachers now are being asked, they want to have some sort of web presence, right, for their parents and for their community. Which could be a website, but often could be like a class Facebook page where parents can kind of track what their students are doing, and it can be a closed group. Or maybe it's just a place to showcase projects and student work, and lots of ways to do this. But one of the ways to consider, especially as students start getting older, is could they be contributing to, at the high school level, could they become your social media coordinator, where they're actually running the whole thing for you, or 2 students are, or 3 students, or 1 student. At the junior high and elementary level, it still might require the teacher to sort of manage that or facilitate that, but the students could certainly be helping. So like maybe someone's taking the pictures, maybe someone's writing the narrative, right? Because one thing as a teacher is you really are busy. So can you kill 2 birds with 1 stone here? I want stuff to be public and my parents and my community to know what my students are doing, but I have limited time. But if my students can help me take the pictures and help me document the story, and then I just have to take theirs and, you know, publish it, if you will, that's pretty cool, right? So I'm getting my students' work public and promoting my learning that's happening, but my students are also getting a value-added experience because they're taking on that larger role. So think about how we use our students to you know, both advance themselves and our you know, kind of our classroom community message. Marketing coordinator. So just this idea that we're putting, and it's not so much about the title, and we can create titles and we can create roles and positions. That's the idea. What are we doing as an educator that we can turn over to our students? And the reality is, it's probably quite a bit. And I don't mean just like the gopher thing, but you know, I'm talking about legitimately taking on part of the work where their role increases. So we're, again, killing 2 birds with 1 stone there. I can give you a quick example too. At my last school, the one that opened in 2008, high schools have teachers' aides, right? And we're really familiar with that. But the reality is it's also, we wanted students to take on a larger role. So we created something called Student Project Coordinator. And it was really this idea that they were co-teachers, co-facilitators. And if they had an expertise in a given area, they were an advanced student, or they had some unique skills, they could apply to be a student project coordinator. And teachers could utilize them to lead small groups or to demonstrate something or to coach kids, and it really was about the idea of making every student a teacher. And again, they were getting work done in the classroom that the teacher might not be able to get to, but more importantly, they were also advancing their skills and their learning, they're helping their, everything from their resume to their skills and to their, kind of long-term goals. So in terms of how we look at things in the classroom where we create choice for kids, Barbara Bray and Kathleen McClaskey here did a great job of showing how, we want to, as students become more skilled, how we can move them to take more and more control of their work, more and more control of their projects. So this idea at some point, students can start not only choosing things that we're offering them, like from a menu of project options or topics or books they can read or, essay topics and so on. But the reality is, as it becomes more project-based, can they start initiating some of the ideas, maybe things that they want to learn and study? Can they become that co-designer, designer? At some point, we're trying to get them to be that advocate entrepreneur where they are pursuing things on their own. That's the ultimate, right? But we kind of have to move them through that spectrum. One of the things is just starting with choice. Like as we launch projects, do students have choice of topics, of things that they get to do deeper learning on, like research? And it's okay to assign all students a topic, but maybe they choose some aspect of the topic so they can specialize a little bit. Maybe they assume a role like we talked about. Maybe they choose how they present their final work. Maybe some students want to produce a video, some students want to do a slideshow presentation, some students want to do a written presentation. Lots of ways to present their final work and learning, right? Maybe they choose whom they work with sometimes. I know as a teacher, we don't always probably want to do that because we know certain relationships maybe are less productive than others. But the reality is that if we never allow them to choose a partner, again, we're not really modeling what the real world is like, and they're not getting those skills. And there are times when we have to facilitate that, but there are times when it's good for them to choose that as well. So again, just creating all different kinds of, I think it's the most successful thing is when teachers create the list of choices. If we say you can do anything you want, that would overwhelm students, right? Creates more. And if we say you can only do it this way, then that's sort of a long term that really shuts them down, right? So there's that happy medium of creating some choices for them that we know that they can be successful. So lots of different ways to do that. We're gonna move a little faster, but real quickly is that you could have the same product, same focus. You could have start rotating through this where you might have a different product, a different focus. The reality is as we assign projects or topics or areas of research and study, can we have people have choices in whether it is what they're studying or what they're focusing on, or how they're presenting the final product or project. And there's lots of different ways to do that. And real quickly, some other ways students can have a voice in their school. It's called democratization. And if our society is going to model this, then our school should too. So, do we have students involved in the hiring of staff? And I know schools that do this. My school did it at the high school level, but I know elementary, junior high, and high schools that do this. It's really good to have this. We have parents on panels, and that's good. And we have community members, but we really should have a student too. It's a good experience for them. Students have great perspective, and what an opportunity just to hear their perspective. Lots of ways to do that. We don't want it to be just a token thing, but if we can embrace this, maybe lots of different students will have this opportunity while they're at a school, and I think it's really valuable. Maybe it's the idea of principals doing focus groups or meeting with small groups, or surveying, or just getting the ideas that having students contribute ideas to how the school is running. So whether it be policies and procedures or what the priorities are or anything that the school is doing and moving forward on, can we get some student feedback on? And one final one is the idea that all schools have sort of challenges that they're facing, whether it be cultural challenges like bullying or drug and alcohol issues or that type of thing, or food insecurity, you name it, right? Maybe our students can help solve some of these problems. So some of the problems that our adults take on, we often forget to ask the students how they would want to address this, and that creates buy-in. They have ideas that we may not think of, and it's good work for them because that's what the future of work is like for them, is solving problems. So again, we have to give them those opportunities to help us, right, solve the real problems. So a lot of resources on that. Next thing we'll talk about this relationship collaboration part, that in this environment, how do we keep that feedback loop going? And I mentioned earlier about giving out your cell phone number, students texting, emailing, calling. Again, Google Voice is a great way if you want to not give out your personal number, but want to create a number where students can text you and can access you. You can check out Google Voice. But the reality is we have to create ways for them to do that. Just being in class and asking in front of the class is not going to be enough in the digital age, right? They have to have different ways of accessing you, and you have to be willing to be accessed. A lot of us have grown up in the culture of no, that if we ask something that's usually no, it's easy to say no. Matter of fact, I think adults, sometimes that's kind of what we, and as a parent, think about all the times you say no. But our challenge is really, can we create a culture of yes? My first principal told me that's what her job was for me as a teacher to come up with a really innovative idea or project or what I wanted my students to be doing, and her job was to say yes if she possibly could. If it wasn't immoral or illegal, she was going to try to say yes. And that's the kind of thing we have to say. So say yes to access, say yes to students being able to, trust me, in all my years, I only had one student ever take advantage of that in an inappropriate text, and that's not bad after hundreds and thousands of texts and messages and phone calls and emails. And so this idea that learning is going to keep going because the relationship exists, and they know that there's a trust and there's a mutual respect. So we got to model these things. Again, why I think that access is so important, because that is what the world is like now. So we kind of have to model and lead that and show them how we can use these tools for professional applications. And I really think it's also about the customer service aspect. And whether we like that concept or not, students are our customers, right? They have choices. They can go to different schools, or they can go online if they want. We are really there for them, right, for their learning. So we got to ask them and treat them like a customer. Parents too. And it doesn't mean that we do anything that anybody wants or give in to any demand or request, but we have to listen and we have to approach it that way, right? And if we can say yes, we will. And if we have to say no, we'll be able to explain and justify that. And I really think what they want is to be listened to. So both students and parents. So again, this customer service idea, we do it in the real world all the time, and a lot of schools are now doing this where we try to get surveys, and we want, and it's tough sometimes, right? Because sometimes students or parents or community members will say something that bothers us, but we have to listen, right? And the reality is if it's legit, then we need to improve it. So why don't we ask? And so why don't we ask students about their learning? Not about like rate your teacher, like some of these things that people do online, but more about their experience. What are they learning? What are they not learning? What do they want to learn more about? What would help them? What kind of support do they need? What works for them? What doesn't? What are their interests, right? And continually do this, because as a teacher, we can make adjustments, right? And when students feel like they're listened to, they will buy in, right? And a lot of times things are easily corrected, but we just don't know, right? And so you can ask, you can have one-to-one conferences, one-to-one conversations, you can do surveys, the reality is find different ways to ask and keep asking. Google Forms are great for this, and a lot of us are using it, but there's lots of tools out there, and it doesn't mean you can't do the face-to-face conversation, right? So focus groups or that type of thing. So, and here's, again, what kind of questions can you ask? As a teacher, how can I help and support you in class? What projects are you interested in? What do you want to do in the future? What's been the most successful thing thus far? What do you learn the most, right? Are you enjoying it? Because if they're not enjoying the learning experience, they're probably not learning, right? Is it too challenging or too difficult? Not challenging enough. You get the idea. So finally, I want to talk about the projects that people can do. So the reality is, regardless of age group or grade level, how much can we connect them to the community more and to real world problems and challenges that they're going to be facing the rest of their lives and in their careers, and give them an experience where they're going to be enriched but also empowered. So we're really trying to create learning experiences, right? Not just a class or not just homework, right? It's really trying to transform people, right? We're trying to inspire them. So first of all, we got to build on their interest areas. Kids do have a lot of interests. How many times can we start there? Regardless, and kids have interest in their communities. They care about different issues, and if we start there and try to connect it as much to the curriculum as we can, maybe we get kids to buy in and take that ownership more, right? And the other thing is we're trying to make every student famous these days. The idea is that every student, we've always known, most teachers have always known that every student can be a star, right? And that's kind of one of our, our heart always says that to us. Well, in the digital age, it's really about giving every student opportunity to compete on that global level, right? Publishing is actually a standard, and you can publish your video, you can publish your presentation, you can publish your writing, your photography. Every student could blog. There's all sorts of, but the reality is this is the new version of sharing your work. This is the new refrigerator, right? This is the new bulletin board, and our students need to access that. We need to help them, show them how to use these resources for professional, academic, and career-oriented things. So we don't have time to meet Beverly, but I encourage you later on to look up beverlypham.com, because she's a USC student, a junior at University of Southern California. This is the kind of student that our students are competing with, right? And she has an amazing website that showcases her projects and her skills and interest areas. And my argument is that we all need to be trying to have every student kind of have the presence and be able to articulate the skills like Beverly did by the time she got to college. So, and again, lots of great resources out there for our students to be accessing with their teachers, the free website tools, free blogging tools. So every student can be a publisher, every student can have that positive web presence, or the teacher can have this and include the students. So you can have a class blog, right, or a class website, or like I mentioned, the class Facebook, class social media, right, as the students are young. But there's great things out there like KidBlog and EduBlog, and so kids can do this at all ages in some capacity. And we just need to show them that as they get older, social media can be a professional tool, right? We share our work on this, so educators know this. We need to model that for students. Just a random idea that could be kind of cool to look at as our students advance through our K-12 systems is the idea of maybe purchasing their name. So I've had some parents do this for their students as they graduate from high school. I bought my name about 4 years ago, and I wish I would have bought it earlier. And we have different versions of our names, or we have other people that have our names, but you can probably find some version of it, whether it be .com, .org, .us, .net, something. But the idea is that we're starting that whole digital footprint, digital presence, and it's professional, right? And we share our work and we showcase our interests and our skills, and we're kind of all starting that pathway with our kids. So, project-based learning is going to give us sort of or anything like that, challenge-based, inquiry-based, design thinking. These are ways to access curriculum and instruction that we can take advantage of these cultural things that we're creating, right? Service-based learning opportunities, always important, not just for the resume, but it does transform and change people, right? And it connects us to our community, and kids buy into challenges related to solving real problems out there in their communities. And then we look for some sort of culminating experiences too. We know in high school we have a lot of senior projects, and that's fantastic. But think about the idea this doesn't have to be a senior-only thing. Maybe we have a capstone or culminating activity for every year in school, a junior, sophomore, freshman, 8th grade, as you leave elementary school. So a lot of elementary schools now are doing like portfolio presentations. So at the end of 3rd grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, you have some sort of culminating thing that shows what you've learned and what you, where you want to go next. So you can call them defensive learning. They're called lots of things, but we can do this at all ages and all grade levels. And the idea that people are reflecting on what they've done, and they're also setting goals for. And again, it's that transfer of ownership, right? Because it's about them and about what they want to do and about what they are hopefully learning. So. Teachers are looking at things like Genius Hour and 20 Time. Some of you probably are familiar with these, but the reality is this is, again, the idea of certain formats that have been created or co-opted out there that model what's happening in the real world. So Google used to have a thing where 20% of the time for employees was to work on projects they wanted to work on. So it wasn't corporate directed. It was, they had time to pursue things they want to do, knowing that that employees would come up with their own great projects that Google wouldn't have thought of, right? So as a teacher, it's the same thing. There might be something my students are interested in, and if I just give them a little bit of time, doesn't matter how much time, it doesn't have to be 20%. It could be, it could be once a month, it could be once a week, it could be. The idea is, can I give them a little time that doesn't have necessarily the expectation of our normal class structure. It doesn't have to be. Maybe it doesn't even have to be presented, right? Or maybe it does. I don't know. But the reality is, can we give them a chance to pursue something they're interested in, knowing they might stumble into something? That's how projects are born. That's how nonprofits are born. It's how companies are born, right? It's how passions are born. It's how interest areas, how majors. And so check out things like Genius Hour and 20 Time. And there's all kinds of great resources out there to launch these kind of projects. But what teachers have discovered, elementary, junior high, and high school, is once they create these culture where they really do trust students and respect them and have that relationship, they find little ways to give them opportunities to do something they haven't done before. And what happens to a lot of kids is they really take off, right? Once they feel empowered this way, it's a contagious thing, right? And then it's like, game on about the things they could do, right? That they go way beyond the class or way beyond the expectation. So that's the long-term goal for sure. And we know in education we've had for people that have specific learning challenges, and so we've always had IEPs and stuff. And the idea is the world is looking more and more, can all students have a individualized plan? So can students chart their own course? Can they choose not just the courses they take as they get older, but the projects they want to do, the topics they're in, what they want to read, what they want to become better at? And the more and more we can kind of create that individualized, that's that choice thing, we might see more and more students get empowered, right? And students like the idea that they're doing something that not everybody else is doing. It's that unique opportunity, that unique brand that we're all kind of seeking. And there's all kinds of great resources out there. We'll talk about those in a minute. And some of them are paid, and some of them are free. But literally, there's just every day there's new resources being born. So as educators, we have to pay attention to what's available and how this is impacting us. So we talk about mentors and relationships. It's the idea that it's not just the teacher, or everybody in our community can be a mentor to kids. And there's ways to do this, through companies or through nonprofit groups, and it can even be digitally. As students get older, the idea they get internships or work-based opportunities, students starting their own companies, students starting their own nonprofit groups. So as they get into junior high and high school, it's the idea that they can start up something, right? Whether it be on campus or off campus. I know elementary students that have started nonprofits, elementary students that have started their own companies. It does happen when they get empowered. So again, these are the skills they're going to need regardless of their career choice. So they have to experience and practice them now. So bonus item, real quickly, we want to talk about changing the environment. A lot of people are looking at this. At our school, we really focused on having something that wasn't a library called the Media Lounge, and you can read more about that later, where, again, students had a place to work and gather, and it was a cultural center. I really want to quickly go, what are things that you could do starting tomorrow, today, the rest of the school year, next year, and so on. So defend young people. I think young people get a bad rap. That's kind of like what older folks do, right? We always critique the younger generations. And as an educator, my job is to defend young people and show that they're doing amazing things that we never did before. And when I hear this in public, I always try to defend them. I think it's important as an educator to do that. We know that they get criticized for being on their devices all the time and so on. But the reality is we've always done this, right? People have always been absorbed a little bit in their own little worlds. It's a human thing, right? We're just more connected now. And I see older folks using all this technology all the time too. So it's not a young person thing. We're just more connected, and it's changing things. But defend young people. Next thing is make the public commitment, the promise to them as much as you can, and really, really live up to this. And don't just talk it. You got to walk it. Get connected. Whether it's social media, professional reading, ed camps, different groups. As an educator, we have to be connected to other educators outside our buildings and outside our schools and districts. And we really can do this now, right? There's so many great resources out there. Read non-educational stuff, because there's some great things happening in the world continually, whether it be in business or just in the world at large, that really applies to education. So let's look outside of education for some really good ideas and inspiration. Changing the space, it's not the only thing that matters, but it can contribute to the culture, right? And kids have great ideas about this, and there's all kinds of great resources out there, and opportunity for kids to contribute. Ask students about everything, okay? I don't care what it is, get feedback on them. Show them that their opinion matters, show them that they're involved in all these things. You'd be surprised what they'll come up with. And once you start this quest, it's amazing. Be a culture fan, study the culture of other organizations, whether it be other schools or nonprofits or businesses. Check out all the things that are online. It's amazing now. This idea that we really are beholden to a textbook or a particular adopted curriculum is really kind of silly, given the fact that we have this plethora of resources being developed daily, right? So look at what's happening in education, pay attention to it, and realize that it is relevant and it's different than before, and that we are doing things that have never been done before. And we are kind of dispensing with some things that we just accepted as the norm, but maybe are not connected to success, right? Again, some good resources for you. Just the last message to you is model everything. So these things that we talk about in education, we have to really live them. So if we're encouraging students to become responsible in technology, we have to be responsible in technology. You want a student to be a lifelong learner, we have to be a lifelong learner. So we can't be hypocrites. We have to do this stuff too. And I think it's fun to try to stay relevant and stay connected and stay involved at any level, right? But the most important thing is that kids are looking for us to model the things that we say are important. If it's not illegal or moral, why not give it a try? If you guys want to connect with me more, again, these slides will be available here at the end, and then you can text, email, connect on social media. These are just ideas that I think have potential, but I know my experiences and what other people are doing, and you guys have great ideas as well. And so we got to keep moving all these things forward to really make it a different experience for our students. That's what I got. There's the link to the slides. We're going to have some questions here coming up, and we also have some great resource information. So again, there's the link to the slides, if you guys can make note of that. And then you can also contact me once you have that as well. I do want to thank you.
Great.
Hopefully we have some good comments or questions, Cindy.
Yes, we do. We've had some additional comments and questions come through. So thank you for going through all that information, so many great ideas. And so I'm going to take a couple minutes before we do the questions to go over a little bit about Odysseyware and how this fits into the conversation. So let me go ahead and pull up my slides here and share my screen. All right. So Odysseyware, for those of you who aren't familiar, we are a multimedia enriched online curriculum and instructional services company. As we work with districts across the country, there are several common things they tell us they are looking for in online solutions. One that is cloud-based, available 24/7 on any device. One that is engaging and flexible. A program that's aligned to their state standards, helps prepare their students for high-stakes tests, and one that is research-based and data-rich. And so we offer all of that and much more. We provide support for 21st century educational solutions such as blended learning, online learning, credit recovery, intervention, all via a flexible platform, rich set of data reporting, customization features, which I'll talk a little bit more about, professional development, and accredited academy and academic services. So all of the Odysseyware courses are built on a single platform. This provides a consistent experience across all of our courses and also enables educators to create cross-curricular content and lessons in their courses. We have courses in each core academic area, a series of advanced placement courses, and a wealth of elective and supplemental content. So this is across grades 3 through 12. So some of these electives include business, world language courses, blended learning library resources, and assessments and diagnostics and test prep, things like that. We also have CTE courses. We have over 80 courses, including career explorations in middle school. These are all aligned to each of the 16 career clusters. And as students go through the cluster, it's a progression of related content supporting them in their preparation for career pathway specific certifications. So that's over 300 courses, and so all of these lessons are built on the modalities of understanding by design and gradual release of responsibility. It's presenting learners with big picture concepts and systematically drilling down to more granular supporting standards, and then there's opportunities for practice throughout. Students have access to an instructional toolbox, and there's also translations for includes 23 different languages. So I want to talk a little bit more about the customization. This is a really big piece of our instructional design. So teachers and administrators can easily customize course content and instructional sequence, so you can align with state, district, school scope and sequence design, also help fill gaps, expand learning opportunities, and address individual learning needs. So with simple drag and drop, you can resequence entire courses, individual lessons, really make it your own. As I mentioned, these cross-curricular learning opportunities, so you can take content from any of those 300 plus courses and insert lessons and projects. So, you know, if you're working with a math course and you want to put in some CTE concepts, then you could go ahead and do that. And with flex assessments, the tests and quizzes and the content automatically adjust to whatever adjustments you make to those lessons. You can even create your own quizzes to whatever content that you might want to put in. So if you have your own digital content or school, something maybe the school or the district has created, that can all be added to the Odysseyware platform. So you can add in individual lessons, or you can create an entire new course from scratch. So again, really enables you to do something really specific for your students and really plug into what their interests are. So with that, that's just some highlights there of Odysseyware. So we'll go here into some of these questions. So here is actually a comment from a little earlier in the conversation, just kind of an example of how culture is kind of being incorporated into this particular district. They actually started school on a Thursday this year, and this participant here, she said that it really was a wonderful experience because the educators had 2 days in which they could bond with the students, kind of go over the rules, regulations, things like that. The students could get familiar with the school, their classmates, their culture, and then when they came back, then they could really hit the ground running. So she just gave that example as a really different and fantastic way to start the year. So I don't know if you want to give comments on that, Michael, about structuring the day or things like this or like that example that you've seen be impactful?
Yeah, I think, one, we're seeing a lot of schools that are starting midweek now on Wednesday or Thursday, and that sort of lends itself to doing something different and not just starting school, like you would any other day. And I think, again, we have to educate people that it's not about fun and games, or it's just not about, hey, we're not doing academics. It's about what are we doing to prepare to do academics. So are we teaching kids protocols? Are we challenging them? Or, again, the relational thing? And I just think, it's the idea that, how do we set up the academics, right? And I know a lot of schools that are doing things where they'll actually have students do some projects and some activities that teach them the skills or the protocols, but it's non-academic topics, so it's not like jumping right into the curriculum, but they are showing them that, how to do a presentation, or, how to use this protocol, or this diagram, or this skill. And so you can introduce the academics, but in some friendlier ways, and then try to build the skills and the buy-in and the relationship, as well as I think there's opportunities to do lots of, to teach kids the culture of the school, and also why we're doing any of the things we do. So it's important for sure.
Great. And here's a couple questions or comments kind of all related to this idea of how, as individuals on this call listening today and jotting down all these wonderful ideas, how can they convince their colleagues, their administrators, to go along with these ideas?
Yeah, that's I think definitely a challenge at times, and you definitely want support. It's difficult to do this all on your own, to be just a rebel by yourself. And so looking at those different things that we discuss, is there an area you want to focus in on? Hopefully you have administrative and leadership support in these long-term goals. I think probably the best thing to do is to try not to do things alone. See if you can get a colleague or two to try to experiment with some of this together, and you can make it fun, do a contest with each other, say, hey, I'm going to try this, you try this, let's see what has the bigger impact. As people started having success, or maybe if it's changing the culture, then I think people will join you, so, the things that administrators and probably other educators pay attention to is, hey, if you get great parent feedback because you're doing something, that's going to mean something. If you get great student feedback, those are hard things to argue with, you know what I mean? So, so try things, but then also try to get some feedback on it. And parents and students will appreciate that. And that can be data that you can use to, quote unquote, show someone that, convince someone or demonstrate to someone why you want to continue to do that. So.
All right, and I think we've got time for one more. So this one's, I'll kind of rephrase here. So as a teacher that's going to try some of these things and start getting students' feedback, probably not going to day one have students really know what to do and how to respond. What are some things to anticipate as you start this process?
I think that in my experience, it will be that because it's different, it can be different for kids depending on their experience, that students, just like adults, will sometimes want to retreat to the previous model, right, or whatever that feels more comfortable. And traditionally, students have not been asked their opinion a lot, so to some degree, they don't want to necessarily offer that. Or some students will, but a lot of them will be. So I guess expect reluctance, expect it. Not kids to be immediately excited, even though you think it's a better way and a better thing. It takes time, right? Because they will, just like adults, retreat to what's, their previous experience, right? So don't give up, and I would say don't abandon things. Keep, when you start doing something, it takes time, it takes practice. And the other thing is, maybe anything you're trying, try to do it in this most least threatening manner. So again, starting with a non-academic sort of thing, or a practice approach, that whatever it is you're trying to introduce, and then build the trust, build the relationship, build the skill, and then but don't abandon it, and don't expect everyone to embrace it immediately. Even the student who should embrace this, we think, because it's empowering or potentially empowering, won't automatically do that. So we have to expect that change is hard for them too.
Great. That's great advice and great feedback. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Again, thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences and kind of doing this different type of student feedback, interaction, student voice, really helping them become those owners of their own learning. So just as a reminder for those of you still on the call with us, we have been recording the event. We will get you a copy of that and a copy of the slides, so you can just click on all those different links that Michael has shared. You'll receive that to your email within 24 hours. And really appreciate everyone's time today. Enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon.